Hi, I am Christine Wingfield, and I am here today to talk to you about Paul Levy's taking charge of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center and some of the lessons learned and what he did right in getting that project moving forward and some of the leadership skills that it took to make that happen. The first book I'm going to make a reference to is Who Moved My Cheese? And the reason I do this is it has a lot to do with how change occurs and how to adapt to that change. Granted, it's more of a parable than anything. However, it's a good source to look at for how we interact in an organization. This particular book I won't touch on 100%. However, I will make some reference to it. It has to do with the maze of an organization and the cheese as far as how to keep your eye on the prize. And it's a really good analogy for how to get to the changes in an organization. That is, change is going to happen. You have to anticipate that change. Then you need to monitor the change. You must adapt quickly and actually make that change. Then you have to embrace the change and just actually enjoy it from there. And the next one is where I'll get more in detail. The second book I'm going to utilize and will be my main emphasis for this analysis is going to be John Cotter's Leading Change. From the text on page 20, he states, an examination of these success stories reveals two important patterns. First, useful change tends to be associated with a multi-step process that creates power and motivation sufficient to overwhelm all sources of inertia. Second, this process is never employed effectively unless it is driven by a high-quality leadership, not just excellent management. It's an important distinction that will come up repeatedly as we look at the significance of the organizational change. Now, from there, I'm going to spend most of my time looking at the 8-stage process of creating major change. The first is you have to establish a sense of urgency. The second step is creating the guiding coalition. The third, develop a vision and strategy. Fourth is communicating that change vision. The fifth is empowering a broad-based action. The sixth is generating short-term wins. The seventh, consolidating gains and producing more change. And the final step is anchoring new approaches in the culture. So before we can get to where we bring in the books, we have to back up and look at a few things with Levy's life. So in November and December of 2001, he met with the selection committee and they went back and forth for a bit. And by mid-January, he actually officially took the job, which was January 7th. January 8th, he publicly announced job cuts. It's probably not going to go too well.
So we're back at the day of January 10th, where the announcement is made that we may lose 500 to 700 jobs, and the Boston Herald took no time of getting that to the press. And the most important thing here to note is towards the end, I've got it highlighted here, that these guys need to make their changes quickly. And I want to refer back to Spencer Johnson in Who Moved My Cheese. And if you recall, that's step 4 is really that. You have to adapt to the change quickly. If the quicker you let go of the old, the sooner you can move forward and start embracing that change and do it for the success of the business.
So the following day, the Hunter Group report was released. In addition to that, Levy did a few things that were pretty good, which was he kind of did an open door style policy with his employees. And he emailed out that report and made it available to everybody. So he wound up addressing about 300 people's concerns and all like that. So he immediately got the message out, which is vital in any organization. Within a few days, the care group had some issues arise, and it was determined that they were missing that CEO person to basically have the overall authority and provide direction for the team of group or the group. So, 2 weeks from taking the job, he finally is able to release and announce the recovery plan. And this is where we're going to start to see the change happen. He has done a great job so far as establishing a sense of urgency. It was a matter of, are we going to shut down, become a nonprofit versus profit? What are we going to do? Or can we just go ahead and move forward or shut the door? What are we going to do? So he provided some direction in that, and it was an urgent situation. So 2 weeks from taking the job, they're moving forward. So he's developed a vision and strategy, which is step 3 on leading change on John Cotter, which was create the vision to help direct the change effort. And then from that, develop strategies for achieving the mission. He designed that by opening his door and listening to the employees' recommendations and such. So we'll see how it goes from there. So the chief of service and Paul Levy start kind of getting into it with some objections on what the vision should be and what it shouldn't be. So when you develop a plan, the third step in Cotter's analysis is develop a vision with strategy, which was develop the strategies for achieving that mission. And for this particular case, the chief of service was getting in the way of what Levy was trying to accomplish. So with that in mind, we have what Levy's response back to him was, which is, as it stands now, you are a loose confederation with no strategic vision that can be melded in the broader vision for the medical center. No effective way to implement change and no accountability. That is no recipe for success. Levy's right. With the way the chief of service was working, it failed. And they weren't keeping an open door policy, and they were keeping the information up at the top and not funneling it down and not listening to their other employees. It causes a lot of problems, and it had already been failing, and that's why they were in the deficit that they were currently in. So now we're at March, and Paul Levy did a few things that are pretty vital. He went ahead and assembled a task force to implement the plan, and he sent out an email to let everybody know about it, how he was going to classify the plan. And he made a 5-step process of those steering committees. It's going to be how to bill and collect funds for patient care, how to determine what supplies and equipment are best used for patients, and how to get it at the best price. The third is the best way to organize and deliver and bill for outpatient services, how to increase the number of patients visiting the hospital, and the final one is how to determine the appropriate scope and scale of the academic progress. He also in that email advised them to submit any comments that they have for that. Around the same time, he also publicly promoted Dr. Lavala as the network integration to enhance the clinical relationships, and Mike Covington as the chief business ventures. He had led the BID Now, nationally recognized offices for intellectual property and transfers. That was a newly created position that was much needed. So here in a minute, we're going to get to how all of Paul Levy's steps have followed John Cotter's 8-step process on developing a vision and strategy. To conclude, Paul Levy was successful in taking charge of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And he did this by following John Cotter's 8-stage process of creating major change. The first step was establishing that sense of urgency, and he did that in his initial job offer and his motivation to get in that position prior to the report being released. The second is creating the guiding coalition, and he begins to slowly start working on this process as soon as he's in the door. The third is developing a vision and strategy, and he accomplished this in his recovery plan. Step 4 was communicating the change vision, and he did this with his employees, getting the information out, letting them see the report, and creating an open door policy with them. The fifth step is empowering the broad-based action, and that's just getting rid of the obstacles, all the things that are in the way, and sometimes that is more directly affiliated with personnel and making those personnel changes. The sixth is generating short-term wins, and we saw that with him breaking down into 5 working groups. And in addition to that, with those short-term wins, in a short amount of time, he was able to create multiple working groups with the task force announcement, the kitchen cabinet meeting, the president council by the care group, assessing that management team, undergoing negotiations with the care group, and providing financial updates to the boards. He created those smaller working groups, he acquired new hospitals, and he addressed capacity planning issues and nursing issues. The seventh step is consolidating gains and producing more change. And he was rather successful in that because 6 months after taking the position, he was able to set performance objectives for the Chiefs. The eighth and final step for John Cotter's creating major change approach is to anchor the new approaches in the culture. And Paul Levy continues to move forward in doing this and providing guidance for the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And at the end of the day, he was successful in correcting a lot of issues with that location. And as far as I'm concerned, it was a success.